Hey guys, and welcome to week 6. This week we're talking about language, and this, in addition to narrative distance, these are the two things that are, for me, are the key to getting voice nailed down. So last week we talked about point of view, and so now you kind of have the gist that you're either in first person or limited third person. So you have to stick with one character for a scene, and you have to know that character in and out, and you have to be in their head. And so now this week is talking about the language you use to get in their head so that the reader really feels like they're in their head. And language is really where the rubber meets the road, where we're really getting into the nitty-gritty of how you voice. I mean, language and voice obviously are hand in hand. And so now I try to get into, at a really practical level, how you connect it. So the first thing I talk about is a looseness to stiffness scale. And like my first example is, to make this really obvious, is like in a fantasy novel, you can either say, "The queen in yonder castle has bequeatheth to me this quest, to go ye forth and tame ye dragon," or you could say, "Oh Lord, not again. Another messenger? That's the fourth this week. Doesn't the queen get it? I'm not interested. Castles, dragons, I'm done. No more heroing and no more questing." So here you can see, like, even with a style that is often given to a more like highbrow language, like think Tolkien, you can use this more approachable language that's very voice driven. Like, we can really connect with this second, looser voice because he feels more like a character to us. He feels more relatable. These are more like thoughts that you would have in your head. "Oh Lord, not again. Another messenger. No more questing. I'm done." That kind of thing. These are very realistic kind of thoughts. Basically, this is the basic question to ask yourself. Are these thoughts that a real person would naturally have in their head? And that's what this lesson is all about. That's kind of what we were trying to get to in chat last week, and that's where we kind of stumbled. So I brought up an example, and this was the example. Andrea was texting on her phone with her BFF when she pushed out the door of her high school, and the fragrant aroma of spring flowers suddenly doused all her senses. And the issue with that, and I know it was harder for us to kind of see, probably because we hadn't had this lesson yet, and maybe I was getting a little ahead of myself, but you don't like naturally think when you're just like, you're in texting mode, and if you're a teenager, if you're really like inhabiting that character, you're in texting mode, and you don't like walk out a door and suddenly think, "Fragrant aroma of spring is dousing my senses," And that's what this is all getting about. You're in a character's head, so you have to use language like that person is thinking. So I'm going to keep using examples all throughout this lesson. So another one is, and you need to know why you're making the choices you're making in the language. So do you say, "Billy Lee trumpeted his fury," or do you say, "Billy Lee was pissed"? These are the choices you have to make. Like, even to the point of, does your character say yes, or do they say yeah? Do they say greetings, or do they say hello, or do they say hey, or do they say yo? Like, all of those are telling us so much about your character. Where did they grow up? Where do they live? What kind of culture do they like now? And these decisions about the language that you're going to use, even not just externally, but in their internal voice, in those thought bubbles that you're putting between everything, that's what we're talking about when we're getting to voice. And it's these internal thoughts that are voice. So that we're just reiterating this over and over. And another thing that I notice in a lot of manuscripts that I edit is something we call purple prose. And that's where we kind of do these authory gymnastics, where we write these either, there's like two ways to do it. We write these really kind of beautiful and lovely, lovely phrase, like the example I used is carved ivy vines drip down the marble stairs, winding and twining like whimsical lovers, locked, ensconced in an eternal embrace. And that might be like a really lovely turn of phrase. Often these are very lovely turns of phrases, but they're really foreign to voice. Like even somebody in a magical land isn't thinking that. Even a poet doesn't really walk around thinking like that. So when you write that, you're putting like these tread, in the way for your reader, where they just cannot connect to this character because they're just like, okay, that's some nice writing, especially if you're putting a lot of those in to where you're like, wow, I'm being really lyrical in my language as a writer. But all that is it's just you're authoring all over the place. And you're disconnecting your reader from what's happening because of your language. We'll talk in the last lesson, lesson 8, is about lyricism, and we'll talk about building that back in. But right now, we're stripping it away to get to your character's voice. So in lesson 8, we will talk about how to build it back in through your character's voice. But right now, you need to look at how does my character think naturally, and most of this is very unnatural. And so it's not even the really obviously overwritten, like her hair was like the twine of vines, that kind of the obviously overwritten or purpley prose. It can be like these really long and involved metaphors. Like here's one. He made the courtroom his own private orchestra ballet. The opening statement, his starting leap, the witness questioning, his quiet build-up, and his closing statement, the blaring of trumpets announcing his triumph. So that these are some other, like we do these really involved kinds of things that, again, we can kind of like point to and like hold on to as our like really cool authory gymnastics, but again, are totally foreign to voice. This is not something that a character is thinking, and all of our narrative has to be character driven. Close third person is you're in somebody's voice, and voice is what your readers are connecting to or not connecting to. And they're not thinking in these elaborate metaphors and these drawn out, similes. It's not what's happening. And I do this too. I just held on to this line forever in my most recent manuscript. Where is it? I think I even put it in the lesson. Oh yeah. There was the witch herself, looking as demented as any cauldron-gazing hag Shakespeare could have dreamed up. Yeah, he was a 17-year-old boy who did not read Shakespeare. There was no reason. It was just me, the author, like really liking that line, and it took way too long for me to be like, no. You've heard that line, kill your darlings. Well, this is where it applies. Kill your darlings in your language because they're impeding voice. They're impeding your readers being able to grab on, anyone being able to like really get sucked into your world. Okay, so then I'll go into other language considerations. So then this is where I'll just be like kind of asking you questions. What's your character's education background and socioeconomic background? Where did they grow up? Did they go to college? Even if they didn't go to college, they do a lot of self-taught, self-reading. And this like helps you think through backstory too. Maybe if they didn't grow up in an area that had as good of an education system, did they go around it? Or if they went to Harvard, then there's certain like cultural pomposity that goes along with that. So then they might have stiffer language, but maybe then they like intentionally tried to get away from that culture. So that those things will come up linguistically, or should come up linguistically. And then you can start making a list of their linguistic quirks. So I'm asking about slang also. You know, make a list of what kind of slang they use. Did they grow up in the 90s? So they should have certain kinds of slang, like take a chill pill, or or are they like millennials? So then they have new slang. I looked it up. There's a new thing for chill out. Oh, like that guy has zero chill. That's a new slang. I'm a 90s girl, so take a chill pill. What's the age of your narrator? And this can be a really tough one because to get it right. So then I was thinking of books that do get it right, like, you know, of course, the obvious To Kill a Mockingbird with Harper Lee, and Scout is 6. And a recent one is Room by Emma Donoghue, where the character is 5. And that one's really cool because, you know, they're locked in this room because of a really bad situation, but the kid doesn't realize it because it's just, he's been there his whole life and it's all he's known. But as he grows up, he starts to become aware that this isn't a good situation. But so that's a really cool thing you can do if you if you really understand how a kid views the world. But it's just tricky because you have to get it right. And you have to understand, you know, the cognitive understanding and language usage. So just watch a lot of videos. You know, it's again those things where you can do the immersive understanding, like we talked about, where you can watch just tons of YouTube videos and read psychological behavior, you know, cognitive behavioral of children that age and stuff to figure it out. So if you want to do some of those cool things. And then just other things, if you're going to write in dialect, which please don't, and you'll read why I say please don't. And yeah, other things. And then I'll get into, this is going long. Okay, but then the latter part of the lesson is about like sentence length, and if you're going to do long involved sentences versus short sentences, and sentence structure, and how you need to vary those, but how even the sentence length and the way you structure sentences can also tell you about your reader, so that you're getting even not just the language, the words they use, but how you create a sentence itself can tell you about a reader. So lots of cool stuff at the language level, and it's really important for your character. This is this is where the rubber meets the road. This is the most important thing apart from narrative distance about really connecting voice at the writing level. This is at its most basic level at language. Okay, so I'll see you next week, and I'll see you at chat this week. All right, bye guys.